Imagine holding in your hand a coin worth as much as the daily life of an ordinary Roman citizen. A small piece of silver, stamped with the face of an emperor, powerful enough to buy bread, pay taxes, and finance armies that conquered continents. Now, imagine that the very same coin, over centuries, turned into a symbol of greed, corruption, and economic collapse. The story of the Roman denarius is not just the story of ancient money, it is the story of how an economy can sustain an empire, and how that same economy can destroy it from within. How could something so small have such a colossal impact on the fate of the world? What secrets lay hidden in these coins that power and politics never wanted the people to see? For centuries, Romans believed their wealth and stability were eternal, that their conquests and trade guaranteed a brilliant future for the Republic and later the Empire. But beneath that surface of prosperity, the denarius was being manipulated, debased, and used as a weapon of power, slowly transforming from a foundation of strength into a tool of decay. Every inflation, every cut of silver content, every imperial decree carried consequences that citizens, soldiers, and even senators often didn't understand until it was far too late. Today, when we hear about financial crises, runaway inflation, or bursting economic bubbles, we rarely look beyond our modern charts and central banks. But history shows us these patterns are not new. More than 2,000 years ago, a tiny silver coin had the power to build armies, fund massive infrastructure projects, and at the same time corrode the foundations of one of the greatest empires the world has ever known. In this video, we're going to uncover the secrets of the Roman denarius, how its creation fueled the rise of Rome, how its manipulation led to devastating crises, and what lessons we can take to understand our own relationship with money today. But be warned, what you're about to discover may change how you think about money, power, and the fragility of even the mightiest civilizations. Are you ready to follow the trail of a coin that literally wrote and erased the history of Rome? The story of the denarius is more than ancient history, it's an unsettling mirror of our own economy. To understand the power of the Roman denarius, we must first step back to the world of early Rome. Long before emperors stamped their faces on silver coins, Rome was a city of farmers, traders, and soldiers, navigating a world defined by barter and scarce precious metals. Wealth was measured not just in coins, but in land, livestock, and the loyalty of allies. In this environment, the invention of a standardized currency would prove revolutionary. Around 211 BCE, during the Roman Republic, the denarius emerged as the backbone of Roman finance. This small silver coin was originally worth 10 asses and served as a reliable medium of exchange. Its creation coincided with a period of expansion and warfare, including the Second Punic War, where Rome faced Hannibal and his legendary elephants. The denarius allowed Rome to pay its soldiers efficiently, incentivize loyalty, and fund campaigns across vast territories. Without it, Rome's armies would have been shackled to a slow, unreliable barter system. Key figures in this era were not just generals and senators, but the moneyers, officials responsible for minting coins. These men held a unique power, the ability to decide what image would appear on the denarius, subtly shaping political propaganda and the perception of authority. At first, the coins bore the images of gods or symbolic figures, reinforcing civic pride. Later, they would display the faces of living leaders, a move that blurred the line between political power and financial control. By the end of the Republic, the denarius had become more than money. It was a tool of influence. It enabled Rome to transform from a city-state into a continental power. Yet, lurking beneath its silver surface were seeds of instability. The very mechanisms that allowed Rome to expand would eventually be manipulated, leading to inflation, devaluation, and, ultimately, the collapse of trust in the currency. As the Roman Republic expanded, so did the stakes of money. By the 1st century BCE, Rome was no longer a city-state but a sprawling Mediterranean power, with provinces generating immense wealth and armies demanding constant pay. Figures like Julius Caesar recognized that control over currency was as vital as control over legions. Coins became political tools, spreading messages of loyalty, military victories, and divine favor. Caesar himself appeared on the denarius, a controversial act that challenged centuries of republican tradition, where living rulers were rarely depicted on money. Following Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, the struggle for power intensified. Octavian, later Augustus, consolidated control and initiated reforms that would stabilize Rome's finances, at least temporarily. He standardized coinage, introduced consistent silver content, and leveraged the denarius to create confidence among soldiers, merchants, and citizens. These measures allowed the early empire to flourish, funding roads, aqueducts, and monumental architecture that projected Roman power across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. Yet beneath this apparent stability, subtle manipulations were already emerging. Coins began to lose small amounts of silver, too little to notice immediately, but enough to allow emperors to mint more coins for new campaigns. This practice, known as debasement, set a dangerous precedent. Rome's reliance on the denarius meant that even minor alterations could ripple across the economy, inflating prices, reducing trust, and eventually undermining the very authority that coins were meant to reinforce. By the time of the late Republic and early Empire, money had become more than a medium of exchange. It was a reflection of power, ambition, and political calculation. The denarius was the lifeblood of Rome, but also the seed of its eventual financial crises. Every emperor who touched it faced the delicate balance of maintaining trust while funding an ever-expanding empire. The story of the Roman denarius begins in a time of necessity. In 211 BCE, the Roman Republic faced unprecedented challenges. The Second Punic War was raging, Hannibal had crossed the Alps, and Rome needed a reliable way to pay its soldiers and manage the resources of a growing empire. Enter the denarius, a small silver coin that would become the backbone of Roman finance for centuries. Initially, the denarius was simple but powerful. Worth 10 asses, it allowed Rome to streamline transactions across a diverse and expanding economy. Soldiers received their pay in these coins, merchants could trade goods with confidence, and the state could levy taxes more efficiently. The denarius became not just money, but a unifying symbol of Roman authority. Every coin bore images of gods or mythological figures, reinforcing civic pride and cultural identity. The impact was immediate. With a reliable currency, Rome could project power farther and faster than any previous civilization. Armies marched on foreign lands, funded by the consistent silver content of the denarius. Trade networks flourished, from Hispania to Asia Minor, and cities across the Mediterranean adopted the coinage standard. By the late Republic, the denarius was entrenched in daily life, from bustling markets in Rome to provincial outposts. However, early success masked hidden dangers. The coin's silver content, initially consistent, became a tool for political influence. Moneyers, the officials responsible for minting coins, began experimenting with imagery and inscriptions, subtly broadcasting messages of loyalty, military victories, and divine favor. These changes, seemingly minor, laid the groundwork for a critical pattern: the intertwining of currency and political power. By the 1st century BCE, the denarius had evolved into more than a medium of exchange. It was an instrument of ambition. Generals like Julius Caesar would later exploit it to consolidate power, while the populace continued to trust that the coins in their hands represented real, lasting value. This trust, carefully nurtured, would become both Rome's greatest strength and its most dangerous vulnerability. As Rome transitioned from republic to empire, the denarius faced its first major tests. The vast ambitions of leaders like Julius Caesar and later Augustus required immense resources, and the silver coins that once symbolized stability began to show cracks. Caesar's bold move to place his own image on the denarius challenged centuries of republican tradition. What was once a coin bearing the gods now carried the face of a living ruler, a subtle but profound signal that money could be a tool of personal power, not just civic stability. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, Rome descended into civil wars. Armies needed to be paid, provinces needed funding, and the demand for coins skyrocketed. It was during this period that the practice of debasement, reducing the silver content of coins, became a tempting solution. By minting more coins with slightly less silver, emperors could finance wars and infrastructure without raising taxes immediately. At first, the public scarcely noticed, but the seeds of inflation were planted. Augustus, Rome's first emperor, recognized the danger and took steps to stabilize the currency. He standardized the silver content of the denarius and reinforced public confidence, ensuring that Rome could continue its expansion and maintain economic order. For a time, this worked brilliantly. Armies were paid, trade flourished, and Rome's architectural and engineering feats dazzled the world. Yet beneath the surface, the problem was growing. Success encouraged overreach. Later emperors, facing mounting expenses from ambitious building projects, military campaigns, and bureaucratic expansion, increasingly relied on subtle devaluation. The denarius, once a pillar of Rome's financial might, was slowly being transformed into a mechanism of short-term survival. This turning point illustrates a crucial lesson. Even a currency backed by centuries of trust can be undermined if political necessity overrides economic prudence. Rome's growing empire and reliance on the denarius made the coin both indispensable and dangerously vulnerable, a paradox that would echo through the centuries and eventually contribute to the empire's decline. By the 3rd century CE, the Roman denarius was no longer the robust silver coin that had fueled Rome's rise. Decades of debasement, driven by military expenses, administrative costs, and imperial ambition, had eroded its value. Where once a denarius was nearly pure silver, now it contained only a fraction of its original content. Prices soared, trust eroded, and ordinary citizens found their savings losing worth almost overnight. The consequences were devastating. Soldiers, once loyal due to timely and predictable pay, began to demand higher wages or defect to rival factions. Merchants struggled with unpredictable inflation, and provincial economies faltered under the weight of devalued currency. The very coin that had united Rome now threatened to fragment it. Economic instability amplified political instability, creating a vicious cycle that no emperor could fully control. Several attempted solutions only made matters worse. Some emperors tried to revalue the denarius, issuing new coins with slightly higher silver content, but these efforts were often too little, too late. Others introduced new coins or alternate denominations, hoping to restore confidence, yet widespread debasement had already undermined the public's trust. The rapid succession of emperors during the crisis of the 3rd century only worsened the problem. Each ruler minted coins to fund immediate needs, ignoring long-term stability. By the time Diocletian enacted his famous reforms around 301 CE, introducing price edicts and new coinage, the denarius had already lost its dominance. Attempts to control inflation with legal mandates failed to address the underlying causes: overextension of the empire, relentless military spending, and the erosion of public confidence in currency. The denarius became a cautionary tale, a once mighty financial instrument that had been slowly corrupted from within. This final stage of the denarius demonstrates a critical pattern. Economic systems, no matter how powerful, are fragile when trust is compromised. Money is more than metal, it is a promise. When that promise is broken repeatedly, even an empire as mighty as Rome can falter. The denarius, which had once built roads, armies, and monumental structures, ultimately became a symbol of Rome's internal weaknesses and the limits of financial manipulation. As a cautionary reflection, we must recognize that economic collapse often begins subtly. Debasement, manipulation, or erosion of public trust may seem minor in the moment, yet their effects accumulate, eventually shaking entire civilizations. Rome's experience with the denarius serves as a warning. Even the mightiest empires are vulnerable when financial systems are mismanaged. Finally, as viewers, we can take action by learning from history. Understanding patterns from ancient Rome allows us to make better choices today, in personal finance, civic awareness, and evaluating governmental decisions. The denarius reminds us that money is powerful, fragile, and inextricably linked to human ambition. By studying its story, we not only understand the past but gain insight into the forces shaping our world today. If this financial chronicle has given you valuable perspective, subscribe to Financial Chronicle to continue unearthing these stories, and comment your biggest lesson from the history of the denarius.